What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel today. Finally, we get Andy back on the show. Today, we're going to do a value trade show. If you have 2 seconds, please hit subscribe and like the video. But Andy, welcome back in. What have you been up to since we've seen you last?
Thanks for having me, man. Just been bopping around, did some shed hunting. I think last time we had already done some alligator wrestling, so just been kind of bopping around, and now just got about a month to kind of hang out. So it's kind of nice, enjoying a little Montana sunshine.
The perfect time to dig into some Dynasty trades. Exactly. When you got some free time. That's how we all do it. So just like I said in the intro, value trades today with Andy. Basically what I mean by value trades, these aren't buy lows. They're not overpays. They're basically just guys that we like the price and we're like, I'd pay that price, and we're going to go send that out. So to kick us off today, we're going to start with wide receiver. Andy, who you got for your wide receiver value trade for the week?
Well, you can see right there. I love Michael Pittman. He's wide receiver 17 on Keep Trade Cut. I've got him a little bit higher. He was the wide receiver 15 last year. And I love the future of this offense. I think another offseason for Richardson to develop. If he can hopefully stay healthy this year, I believe in him as a passer, not just as a runner, but as a passer too. They bring in Adonai Mitchell. So they're giving this offense more weapons. If an offense scores more points, that's more points available for your fantasy team. He had 5 wide receiver 1 finishes last year, but only 5 finishes outside the top 37. So he was pretty just like a consistent guy for your team. He never like exploded too high in games, but he was never like, killed you that week either. He's fully in his prime. He's 26 years old. And I like him on pretty much all teams outside of like a massive rebuild. Like if you're trying to retool, I like Pittman. If you're a contender, I like Pittman. He's still got plenty of years left to have value on your team. And right here, I mean, for a 2025, like mid-first and what I would kind of consider a throw-in player, like Israel Abanikanda, you can
pick your handcuff, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like just
pick your handcuff with who you're trading with. We all know those guys. Sam Darnold, like they drafted JJ McCarthy. Hey man, you want Sam Darnold in this? Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I would love to pay this price for him. I mean, if he was 26 years old and in this class, like if he was available to be drafted in a rookie class, like I'd have no problem taking him at like the 105 in a super flex and probably the 106 in a tight end premium. So, I just, love his value, his upside, and his consistency. He's proven it on the field before. So yeah, I think this is a guy who's definitely worth the price.
Yeah, I think Michael Pittman is the perfect buy, kind of like you said, for let's say you were rebuilding last year. You hit on Puka Nacua, you took Bijan Robinson, your team needs another wide receiver. You pay for Michael Pittman and you get 4 years out of him. That's literally what this move is. You're paying for production. He's 26. I'd say he's going to be pretty good till he's 30. Then we'll see. That's kind of a toss-up. Sure. But he's in the right offense, so I'm with you. Also, an interesting kind of throw in on Pittman. I was reading something the other day about offenses that run a lot of RPOs. And in general, offenses that run a lot of RPOs, read pass options, as most people would know, they actually tend to focus their target share on less people, which makes sense. Like if you're running an RPO, you probably have one read in the passing game. You're either running it or you're throwing it to Michael Pittman. So keep that in mind as we go through the show. But my wide receiver value buy is going to be Zay Flowers, wide receiver 21 on Keep Trade Cut. That's basically where I have him in my rankings. I'm not saying he's wide receiver 12 or anything crazy. I'd be willing to trade away Brian Thomas and a 4th. But, Brian Thomas, Zay Flowers, they're very, very close. I think what I like about Zay Flowers compared to someone like Brian Thomas, or even something Zay Flowers has on some of the guys ahead of him, I almost got even spicier with this. And I was like, would I consider tearing down from Chris Olave to Zay Flowers? I decided against it because I wasn't trying to get that crazy. But I think the logic that I'm coming in this with is Zay Flowers is the wide receiver 1 on his team, where some guys like Brian Thomas, he's behind Christian Kirk. Even Jalen Waddles, Chris Olaves, who I do have above Zay Flowers. But keep in mind, there's just other receiving options. But Mark Andrews, obviously, on the Ravens, a lot of rushing production as well. But in general, I think Zay Flowers would be a great guy kind of in that Michael Pittman category, where if you're looking for a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on your team for the next 4 or 5 years, I think Zay Flowers is affordable. And I would pay Brian Thomas, or this is basically a first and a fourth, right?
Yeah, no, and I love this value for him. I mean, a tool that I love to use is reception perception. And I know Zay Flowers charted super well last year. I mean, he beat zone coverage at the 85% of the time. He beat zone coverage, which is the 90th percentile over the last like 8 or 9 years. And he ran 60% of his routes against zone coverage. The Ravens have to face a lot of zone because they want to keep their eyes on Lamar Jackson. And so to put up elite numbers like that as a rookie, I mean, that's super promising for his future career. He's super young, super speedy, super talented. And I feel like his value is probably just going to go up. So I like this one as well.
And as good of rookie year as Zay Flowers had, I actually thought he left a lot of the bone last year. Like, I feel like I actually remember a couple of plays called back. Wasn't there like a 70-yard touchdown that got called back for him or something? I remember that because I played him that week and I was very disappointed. But there was a lot more production, even on some throws, that I think Zay Flowers could have done. So next, we're moving over to running back. And Andy is suggesting trading away Josh Downs to acquire Aaron Jones. So this is the other side of that Indy receiving core, which I think is an interesting idea Andy's bringing up. Andy, why do you like Aaron Jones? And why are you okay giving away Josh Downs to get him?
Josh Downs definitely showed some promise last year, but, I feel with them bringing Adonai Mitchell, there's only so many targets around an offense that definitely wants to run it. So I love Pittman. I like Adonai, but somebody's got to be the odd man out here. So maybe I'm wrong, but I would bet my money on those guys over Josh Downs. And this is really just a trade if I'm a contending team. Maybe I need an RB2 or an RB3. If I'm rebuilding, probably not as interested in Aaron Jones. He's 29, but he still looked really good last year. I mean, he was injured a lot during the year, but he went absolutely nuclear in the NFL playoffs. Like, he's still got the juice. He's still got the wiggle. He's in Minnesota, where it seems like he's for sure going to be the lead guy. He's a great pass catcher. I feel like, to get JJ McCarthy adjusted to the league, he's going to be open for a lot of checkdowns. They're probably going to try and just, get him some easy completions in a lot of games to get him going. And at RB 35, I just really like his value because he can put up elite numbers for another season. We'll see after that. I really consider this as more like a 1-year buy, and then maybe next year you get another year out of him. But if you're a contender and you're trying to win games, you need guys who score points. It doesn't matter if they're 29 years old or 35 years old or 21 years old. This is just an option to get a lot of points on your team for a really cheap price. So, so I would be willing to trade away Josh Downs. I know some guys who are ranked higher too are like Tony Pollard. And I almost view this as like a redraft. Like, who would I rather have in redraft, Aaron Jones or Tony Pollard? And it's like, I would rather have Aaron Jones, who's going to be the one where Pollard and Tajay Spears are probably going to be splitting time. So if I'm a contender, this is a move I think I got to make.
Yeah, I think Aaron Jones is very affordable if you're looking for running back production. Like you said, you're getting 1 year. He's probably going to miss 4 or 5 games. But the thing about Aaron Jones that's great is he's good when he's on the field. Yeah. And generally in Dynasty, if you're a competitive win now kind of team, you probably have a stable of running backs. So we're not saying Aaron Jones should be your RB2 and you should have no one behind him.
Yeah.
What we're saying is if you got, you have one, let's say you have Breece Hall, but then you have Aaron Jones, Zach Moss, Tajay Spears, you build this kind of RB core or RB committee in Dynasty compared to the NFL committee. And you need these spike week guys that can come in and win you games. Josh Downs, like you said, man, he's a really tough one. I really like Josh Downs. I like Adonai Mitchell. Mm-hmm. One of them wins and one of them's going to lose. I think it's risky on both sides. I think we all like Pittman. And then let's see what happens in the rest of this receiver core. It's also possible that they both are wide receiver 42 and that you don't actually want either one of them. Yeah. So I think Downs is a fine guy if you're a contender. You just don't have the time for him to wait to be productive. You want points right now. So my RB, another old vet, 29-year-old Austin Ekeler. I'm saying I would trade Braylon Allen and Will Shipley, basically two running backs going in like the third round of rookie drafts. This really is a rebuilder, retooler to a contender kind of trade. I just think Austin Ekeler is being a little underrated, all the way down at RB 44 here on KTC. I was doing my Dynasty ranks the other day, and let's set it. I have him higher than 44. I don't have him in my like top 20, but like they have a rookie quarterback. Austin Ekeler is a good pass catcher. I just think he's going to hold a little value for 2 more 3 years. And these guys are just handcuffs to me. I know they're exciting. I know they're young, but they are so buried on their depth chart, kind of like the running back version of Josh Downs, where it's just like, even if we think these guys do have talent, they're buried in the sense that a lot of things are going to need to happen for them to be productive for your team this year, that I would rather get a guy who's going to be startable, even in a flex capacity, in Austin Ekeler.
Yeah, I definitely view him as more of a flex than like a potential RB2. And I definitely like him a lot more in PPR leagues. He's kind of been left for dead in Dynasty because he didn't really look nearly as explosive last year. But I mean, there could have been some injuries and some stuff that we weren't, aware of, and him getting a fresh start, like for this price, I think it's definitely worth the risk because he's shown in the past what he can do. And, if he's getting 5 or 6 targets a game, like that could be huge for your team. So
RB 44 is crazy. If anyone has a sec, go on KTC, look at 43 guys above him. It ain't pretty after about like 24. So there's a lot of wiggle room here. So Andy, QB, now we're going to move on to. You're saying to go get Baker Mayfield on your team, trading away a 25 late second and Bucky Irving. What's your thought here, and why Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, well, and this is definitely for a super flex. Just want to point that out first. But I mean, he's 29 years old, so he's kind of in the middle of his career. He just signed a 3-year, $100 million contract. So there's some stability there. They're bringing back Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. He's got all his receiving options. Trey Palmer showed some flashes. They draft another guy. And Baker Mayfield was the quarterback 10 last year. Now, I don't expect him to do that again. There were a lot of quarterbacks who got injured who were really good as well. But I could easily see him finishing as quarterback 15. And if you need a quarterback 2 to go compete, I think he's a really, really cheap option for your, he's almost out of the QB2 range in terms of value, but I think he's going to give you a lot more points than that over the next couple of years. I would be super happy to trade these guys in a super flex to try and go get him. He's not the sexy guy to have on your team, but sexy doesn't always score points. And, I think there's a lot of points that you can get this year.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I definitely think this trade I would do. And we use KTC as a tool. We all know there's differences in everyone's leagues. A lot of times QBs bring with them more premiums just when trying to acquire them.
Yeah.
But I think Baker Mayfield, if you're looking for a quarterback at this value, I think he's a great guy to go and get, just like you said. I mean, honestly, I had kind of forgotten he was QB 10 last year. Now, like you said, points per game wise, I bet he was closer to 15 or something.
Yeah.
But still, super flex leagues, that's a very good QB2. We need quarterback 2s. There's only going to be 12 quarterback 1s. There's usually 12 teams. So if you have one of the top QB2s, you can still be gaining an advantage on the guys in your league every week with someone like Baker. Now, I'm going to go the opposite approach here, just to kind of bring a different kind of trade idea here. And I'm saying I'm going to tear down from Drake May and pick up Will Levis and Tajay Spears. This is kind of one of those things where maybe you're looking for a starting quarterback for your team for this year. You don't have as much depth, and you're looking to pick up a starting running back in Tajay Spears as well. Someone who I actually think is a little underrated. Spoke about him on a buy low episode last week. I do like Drake May, and obviously I would take Drake May over Will Levis. But I do think this is an interesting idea that we're thinking of. And also keep in mind, I think Will Levis is set up for a lot more success than Drake May is going to be set up for. New England basically has no offensive weapons. Obviously, they drafted a couple guys in the draft that I don't love. I think Tennessee's kind of doing the opposite here. They've got 2 linemen in the first round, both of the last 2 years. They bring over the offensive coordinator from Cincinnati. They signed Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley. Now they have DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, they're all aging assets, but they're still good NFL wide receivers. I think they're giving Will Levis every tool he needs to succeed. And I think if he shows a slight improvement this year, he gets another year. And if he shows a slight improvement that year, he gets another year. So I think there is some upside here with Will Levis. And I've spoken about Tajay Spears enough that I think he's a great value as well. Drake May could take a bit. So this really just depends on the build of your team. But I think in general, there is some untapped upside that I think a lot of people aren't seeing in Will Levis this season and moving forward.
No, for sure. And I mean, he showed flashes last year, and I see this as, this is kind of a gamble trade. Like, this could pay off huge, and I could also see it if he's not good, then he gets replaced in the next year. But sometimes if you want to have the best team in the league, you have to take risks like this. And because then if it hits, then you've got a quarterback for the next few years with great weapons on his team in a great situation. Plus you got, a running back who's got a lot of promise and potential too. So, this one, it's a little riskier, but sometimes those are the moves you got to take to win. So,
yeah, I think for my eyes, obviously I am seeing these as a risk, but I do think there is downside to May. And then I also think it's a little insulated because of the Tajay Spears move, where I think Tajay Spears, I think he's going to be an RB2 for the next 2-3 years as well. So I think you're gaining that asset, even if you're tearing down at QB a bit. So on to tight end. Andy wants to go get Pat Freiermuth, the Muth, on his squad. Pretty cheap price here, mid-third, and Ty Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, this to me seems like nothing. I mean, you look at where he was ranked last year going into the season. He was so much higher. He finished as the tight end 11 in points per game his sophomore year. And then last year, just absolutely riddled with injuries in a terrible offense. And everything looks to be on the up and up this year. Even bringing in Arthur Smith, I mean, the Falcons actually threw more than the Steelers did last year. So I expect the passing to go up with either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. I think they're both an upgrade from Kenny Pickett. You've got no Deontay Johnson, so there's a lot of targets available. And I just think he's a talented player. I saw somebody on Twitter, somebody sent him an offer where they're trading him Pat Freiermuth, and he's like, I don't want any of these garbage offers. Don't send me any garbage tight ends. And I'm like, dude, I don't think he's a garbage tight end. I think there's a lot of guys lower than him that are, but he's for sure the starter. I'm a little worried with Arthur Smith that it's going to be Darnell Washington, since that's what he did to Kyle Pitts, but not really. I think that, at this value, I could see him, finishing as a top 12 tight end this year. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 guy, but I think for this value, if you can't go by one of those elite guys and you've got another guy in your roster to be able to play matchups and to have him, and he's still such a young tight end that there's a lot of years left. So, for this forvalue, I'd throw in thirds at him all day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Pat Freiermuth. I mean, like you were saying, let's just forget about last year. Everything went wrong. The Pittsburgh offense didn't look too great. Freiermuth was hurt. He never really got in rhythm. And I guess, honestly, I've been talking up George Pickens a bunch this offseason, but I really should be using some of those targets to go to Freiermuth as well. I mean, I think Pickens has a big upside just because I think Deontay Johnson moving on is actually a bigger deal than people think. Also, with just better quarterbacks coming in than Kenny Pickett, I think is also a bigger deal than people think. But Pat Freiermuth was a top 12 guy last offseason before. And I don't think he got any worse. I think he just kind of had a throwaway year. And just like you said, I mean, with how much emphasis there is on these top tight ends, some of the lower guys are kind of falling by the wayside as throwaway guys in offers. Just like you said, you're throwing out a 3rd round pick, getting Pat Freiermuth as your tight end 2 with the upside to move up. I mean, I just did my stash show on Wednesday, and I realized I had 4 of my 5 stashes were tight ends. I love stashing tight ends because I just think they can grow in value from what you're paying for them so much. They're 4th round picks or 3rd round picks like Freiermuth, and if he's a starting tight end and it looks like he's going to be a starting tight end, all of a sudden you can get a second round pick for him. And that's kind of just how it works with some
Yeah.
of these guys if you bet on the right situation. So my tight end, much lower. This is kind of just more of a cheap option. But I'm saying Hunter Henry is just a value I'm willing to pay if I'm looking for depth at the tight end position. I'm trading away A.T. Perry. Pick your wide receiver 90, whatever here to go get Hunter Henry. Some people might even give you more than Hunter Henry for A.T. Perry. Had some Reddit guys come at me that I didn't have A.T. Perry high enough in my statistics because I was talking about Rashid Shaheed and they were like, aren't you worried about A.T. Perry? And I was like, not really. But I mean, Hunter Henry's been a top 16, 17 tight end last year. He has some spike weeks, but just kind of like we were talking about Drake May, I just don't think there's enough weapons in that offense that Hunter Henry couldn't have another season in the teens at the tight end position. Tight end 30, same thing I was talking about with Austin Ekeler all the way down at RB44. Start looking at some of these tight ends ahead of Hunter Henry and tell me you wouldn't rather have him. That's really all I'm saying. It's not like Hunter Henry's going to return to a top 5 tight end. It's just like this guy could legitimately be on your waiver wire.
No, for sure. And he's going to score fantasy points this year. And so if you need some tight end depth, I mean, throw him on there because his value is probably going to go up over the season if guys get hurt. And he's shown he has some talent too. He's not, nobody. He's been in this league. He's 30 and he's still the starting tight end for an NFL roster. So, if you throw wide receiver 92, like your wide receiver 5 or 6, or like a future 4th round pick, I think that's great value for him.
Yeah, I love getting backup tight ends on my roster just for cheap trades. I slid back in our rookie draft a couple weeks ago, picked up Tyler Conklin just to get another guy on my team in case TJ Hawkinson comes back slowly, or really just moves like that. I mean, I won a tight end premium league last year, 2 points for tight end catch. I had Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, and Cade Otton. You can build a tight end core with some of these guys if you know how to match up, play them correctly, and you have other strengths on your team. But Andy, thanks for joining us for a little value trade episode. Hopefully you guys can go get some of these guys on your teams. Definitely let us know down in the comments. Andy, any notes or last notes on some of these value trades that you want to give everyone?
I mean, all I'd say is the big thing is know where your team's at. If you're a contender, don't be afraid to buy some of the old guys, even though they're not super sexy. And if you're rebuilding, sometimes you got to take risks. So sometimes trading down to get a few more assets that are all young, can be a great move too. So just know your team.
Cool. Thanks for coming on, Andy. And thank you guys for watching. Hit subscribe, like the video, shoot us a comment on your favorites that we went over today. But we will catch you next week.